You followed the rules. You cut the subscriptions. You stopped eating out. You set up the automatic transfer. And you're still somehow running out of money before the month ends. That's not a willpower problem. That's a signal. And in my experience, when disciplined people fail at the same thing repeatedly, the problem is usually not the people. Over the past few decades, I've watched economic conditions shift in ways that most personal finance content simply hasn't acknowledged. The advice hasn't kept up with the reality. And today, I want to walk through both sides of this. Honestly, let's start with what the data actually shows. Right now, roughly 78% of Americans report living paycheck to paycheck. But here's the part most people gloss over. It's not just low-income earners. Nearly half of people earning over $100,000 per year are in the same situation. Let that settle for a moment. These are not people who skipped budgeting class. Many of them are educated, employed, and by any traditional measure, doing everything right. So, why is this happening? Most people focus on the spending side of the equation. Stop buying coffee, cancel Disney Plus, use cash envelopes. And I'm not dismissing those habits. They do matter. But that's not the part. That caught my attention. What caught my attention is what happened to the income side of the equation over the last 20 years, between 2000 and today. Real wages, adjusted for inflation, have grown very modestly for the median worker. Meanwhile, the cost of housing has more than doubled. In most major North American markets, the cost of food, insurance, and transportation have all moved significantly higher. But the budgeting advice has barely changed since 2003. Here's an example I find useful. Imagine a family in 1995 earning $60,000. They could realistically buy a home, save 10%, and still have breathing room. Now imagine a family today earning $80,000 in Toronto or Seattle. After taxes, after rent or a mortgage, after basic living costs, the math often doesn't close. Not because of lattes, because the structural cost of a normal life has fundamentally increased. And this is where the story changes. When I speak with people who are genuinely stuck, not careless, but stuck, the first thing I try to understand is their ratio, not their income, their ratio. What percentage of their take-home pay goes to fixed, non-negotiable costs? Housing, transportation, insurance, debt minimums. If that number exceeds 60%, no budgeting app in the world will solve their problem, because you can't cut your way to financial stability when the fixed costs alone consume most of what you earn. That's not a personal finance problem. That's a structural problem. That requires a structural solution. Now, and this is important, I'm not saying behavioral changes don't matter. They do, but they work best when the foundation is sound. So let me give you what I consider the honest, updated version of this conversation. There are essentially two levers available to anyone trying to break this cycle. The first lever is cost reduction. And yes, it matters, but not in the ways most people talk about. The second lever is what I call margin recovery. And it's where most people find the real breakthrough. Let's talk about cost reduction first. The biggest single impact that most people can make is on their housing cost, not their coffee budget. If you are spending more than 30% of your take-home pay on housing, rent, mortgage, utilities combined, that is the first variable worth examining seriously. I've seen people cut $200 off their grocery bill through heroic effort while quietly accepting a housing situation that costs them $600 a month, more than necessary. The math doesn't lie. At first glance, moving seems like an extreme step, but consider a $400 monthly reduction in housing costs equals $4,800 per year. That's a starter emergency fund. In 12 months, without changing a single other habit. The second lever, margin recovery, is less obvious, and in my experience, it's where most of the real gains are hidden. Margin recovery means systematically identifying where money is leaking without your conscious awareness, not the purchases you remember making, the ones you forgot you authorized, subscriptions that renew silently, insurance policies that haven't been reviewed in 3 years and are almost certainly overpriced, bank fees that compound quietly each month. One of the most effective exercises I recommend is what I call a financial audit, not a budget, an audit. Go back 90 days in your bank and credit card statements. Categorize every single transaction, not to judge yourself, to see clearly. Most people who do this find between $150 and $400 in monthly spending they cannot consciously account for. That's not a character flaw, that's just noise accumulating in a complex financial life. Now let me be direct about something. Automating savings is excellent advice, and I fully endorse it. But the order of operations matters. If you automate savings before addressing structural cost issues, you often end up pulling that money back out within 90 days. The sequence that works, in my observation, is this. First, understand your true fixed cost ratio. Second, conduct the 90-day audit to recover hidden margin. Third, then automate savings from a position of actual stability. Not optimism. The real question is what happens next when you build a system designed for your actual life, not the life the spreadsheet assumes you have. I want to leave you with one last thought. The paycheck-to-paycheck cycle is not a moral failure. In many cases, it's a rational response to a system that has become genuinely more difficult to navigate. The people I've watched break that cycle consistently, permanently, did not do it by trying harder. They did it by seeing the problem more accurately and then responding to what was actually there. That's the work worth doing, and it starts with one honest look at the numbers.